Did you know? Although he's not a playable character, Diddy Kong is actually in Mario Kart 64. He can be seen by looking closely at the bus in Toad's Turnpike, driving the vehicle. This isn't the only secret surrounding Mario Kart 64. In the earliest stages of the game's development, director Hideki Kono bought some RC cars for testing purposes. After researching their mechanics and physics, his team made a Mario Kart prototype based on a computer simulation of the RC cars. But the prototype ended up feeling too realistic, to the point where it wasn't actually fun. They even had some children try it out, but the kids found it totally unplayable. As a result, the realistic physics were dialed back, and very little from the RC prototype ended up in the game's final build. Later in development, a newer prototype of Mario Kart 64 was shown off at Nintendo Space World 1995 in Japan. At this stage of development, the game was called Super Mario Kart R, with the R standing for rendered, as in rendered graphics. The prototype featured a number of differences compared to Mario Kart 64, and even had some music that was never used in the final game, which is what you're hearing right now. Super Mario Kart R also included Kamek the Magikoopa as one of its 8 races. Kamek was the primary antagonist in Yoshi's Island, the hugely popular follow-up to Super Mario World that launched just a few months prior to Space World, so it made perfect sense for Kamek to appear alongside Bowser and Wario as the game's villains. But one kidnapper ended up getting replaced with another. Kamek was replaced in the final game with Donkey Kong, the vengeful gorilla that kidnapped Mario's girlfriend. Super Mario Kart R also made use of the feather from the original Super Mario Kart on Super Nintendo. After getting cut during development, the feather didn't reappear in the series until Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 20 years later. In addition to multiplayer horizontal split screen, the prototype also allowed for vertical split screen. This option was also cut during development, but it's still hidden inside Mario 64's internal data. You can even unlock it and take it for a spin with a Gameshark and this cheat code. The development process was long and arduous, and the developers even suffered a hard disk crash at one point, erasing some of their work. But according to character designer Tomoaki Kuroumi, the crash was actually a blessing in disguise. The models on the character select screen were originally static, unable to move or blink, but the crash deleted all those models with no hope of recovery. So the developers had to make brand new models, this time giving them animations, an extra layer of polish that wasn't originally supposed to be in the game. A year after Space World 95, and following an 8-month delay, Mario Kart 64 finally launched in Japan in December 1996. There were quite a few details in the Japanese version that were changed in the game's international release, with one difference right on the title screen. In every other region, Mario is the game's announcer, but in Japan, this role was played by Hawaiian actor and radio host John Hulaton.
Mario Grand Prix!
John told us that Nintendo hired him to voice the announcer on Wave Race 64. Then, after the recording was finished, they slid a piece of paper in front of him without explanation, asking him to record just a little bit longer. That mysterious piece of paper turned out to be the lines for Mario Kart 64. John's agent was pretty mad that he never got paid for the role, and Nintendo even spelt his name wrong in the game's credits. 5 years later, that same recording was recycled worldwide in Mario Kart Super Circuit, even in the English version, without crediting John at all.
Congratulations!
In fact, he didn't even know his voice was used in Super Circuit until we told him. Luigi had been voiced by at least 7 different actors in commercials and television shows throughout the 80s and 90s, but Mario Kart 64 was the first time Luigi ever spoke in a video game. We've talked about Julien Bardakoff before. He's the guy who gave the first 251 Pokemon all their French names. A few years before that, however, Julien was translating Super Mario 64 into French at Nintendo HQ. During a break, he was playing Magic the Gathering with a Mario Kart R programmer. One thing led to another, and Julien was invited to take the prototype for a spin. At this point, Toad didn't have a voice yet, so Julien volunteered for the role free of charge. Longtime Nintendo sound director Koji Kondo managed Julien's recording, but afterwards told Julien he didn't really sound like how he imagined Toad. But he did sound like Luigi. So Julien ended up voicing Luigi instead. Wario had never been voiced in a video game before either, so Kondo brought in Julien's friend Thomas Spindler, one of Nintendo's German translators. According to Thomas, Wario was originally conceptualized as a German character, not an Italian. That's why Nintendo brought in a German to provide his voice, and why Wario even speaks German in the Japanese version of Mario Kart 64. He says "so eine Mist," which translate into English as "oh crap." When the game was localized for international release, most of the characters' voices were replaced, including the announcer, Luigi, and Wario. Longtime Mario voice actor Charles Martinet took over all three roles, but the original Japanese recordings did end up getting recycled for both the Japanese and international versions of Mario Kart Super Circuit, as well as Mario Party 1 and 2. When Charles Martinet re-recorded the voices for Mario Kart 64, Wario was rebranded as an Italian rather than a German. We asked Charles if he knew anything about Wario originally being German, if maybe it was his decision to change the accent, just like he switched Mario's accent from Brooklyn to Italian a couple of years earlier. Charles said he'd never even heard about Wario being German, so it sounds like the switch to Italian was probably the result of an oversight by the localization team. They gave Charles the script without any notes about a German accent, so he naturally assumed he'd apply an Italian accent, just as he'd already done for Mario and Luigi. Wario has remained Italian ever since, but interestingly, in Mario Strikers Charged, Wario was given a traditional German fare as his theme music. However, it's unclear if this was an intentional reference to his German origins or just a strange coincidence. Most of the game's billboards were changed as well, presumably to avoid trademark issues overseas. In the Japanese version, the billboards were all parodies of Formula One sponsors, like a Mario billboard imitating the Marlboro cigarettes logo. But internationally, the Marlboro reference was cut out. Instead, the signs just say Mario Star. Likewise, parodies of Italian oil company Agip, motor oil brand Mobil 1, and gas station chain Union 76 were also changed. A mock billboard for the Goodyear tire company was revised as well, and had been an even more blatant imitation in Super Mario Kart R, where the sign originally said "Good Ear." When Mario Kart 64 was re-released on the China-exclusive iQue player in 2003, the game received brand new box art. The game's name was also changed to just Mario Kart, since the N64 never released in China, and neither did the original Mario Kart game on Super Nintendo. The iQue version had some differences as well. The billboards were all translated into Chinese, and the shot billboard was changed to an ad for iQue. The special cup was also renamed the iQue Cup. Mario Kart 64's racetracks have more hidden shortcuts than any other Mario Kart. As well as the usual shortcuts, all but 5 of the game's 16 stages have shortcuts Nintendo never intended, what speedrunners call skips. Common examples of this are jumping over the wall in Wario Stadium or one of the flying leaps on Rainbow Road. In our hunt for secrets, we spoke with Beck Apney, the Mario Kart 64 150cc world record holder. According to Apney, the Japanese version contains a skip not possible in the international release. On Luigi Raceway, you can hit yourself with shells to bounce over a wall and skip about 90% of the race. But there are 3 stages in Mario Kart 64 with tricks that even Apney can't pull off, skips that are virtually impossible for humans. But another speedrunner, Drew Weatherton, spent 7 years perfecting a tool-assisted speedrun that could pull them off. Completing all 16 races in just 18.5 minutes, Apney's the world's fastest racer, but he will never be able to defeat the machines, who have him beat by over 7 minutes. Hidden inside Mario Kart 64's internal data, there's a function that allows you to alter the Y values for every stage. In other words, you can make tracks steeper or flatter by just a little bit, or by a huge amount, including all the slopes, walls, and ramps. You can even invert tracks, so you're essentially racing on them upside down. It's possible the developers created this mechanic just for testing and debugging purposes, but considering the fact it's right next to the flag for mirror mode in the game's memory, the developers may have intended scaling mode as an unlockable extra. Regardless of their intent, the mechanic is still hidden inside the game, and you can try it out for yourself with some Gameshark codes we've added to this video's description. There was also a no item mode scrapped during development. In an attempt to appeal to F-Zero fans, racers were given the option to play without items, allowing for more serious competition where karts clumped together in the final lap, edging each other out for fractions of a second. but focus groups much preferred the game with items, so developers just cut the no item mode completely. According to Tadashi Sugiyama, who designed most of Mario Kart 64's stages, there were also some racetracks that were cut during development. One was a large multi-story parking garage, where you'd start at the bottom floor and race up to the top, essentially racing in circles but in an upward trajectory. This was Tadashi's idea for a more realistic location, but all the constant turning made some people feel sick, so they cut it. There was also a track that took place in a huge city with a pond and even a castle, where players raced around different kinds of houses and buildings. But Tadashi says the stage took too long to race through, so the city was scrapped too. Did you also know Elon Musk wanted to add Mario Kart as a playable game on Tesla cars' LCD screen, but Nintendo rejected his idea? For more facts about the entire Mario Kart series, check out the video on screen. Or if you're just looking for something different, check out our video on how Gordon Ramsay made kitchen nightmares.